I always thought the loudest betrayals came with shouting, slammed doors, maybe even a thrown glass or two. But that morning, the one that turned my entire life inside out, began with nothing more than a notification sound. Just one little ding, the kind that barely registers on most people's radar. For me, it felt like a fuse being lit. The house was quiet, too quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, but the type of quiet you feel deep in your ribs, like the world knows a secret you don't. I slipped out from under the covers, feet curling against the chilly floorboards. Outside, the first sliver of sunrise was stretching across the sky. That pale gold light that makes everything look softer than it really is. Back then, I thought softness was a blessing. Later, I learned softness is where the cracks hide. I made my way down the hallway, passing the family photos, smiles frozen in time, lies preserved in glossy frames. Every face on those walls looked honest, gentle, trustworthy. Funny how photographs never tell the part that matters most. I kept thinking about how yesterday had ended those small, unusual moments that didn't quite add up. A whisper behind a half-closed door. A message on my sister Cassidy's phone she hid too quickly. Dad's sudden, forced laughter during dinner. And the uneasy silence that followed. The kind of silence that tells you something is shifting, but you're not supposed to ask. I reached the living room, where the faint smell of last night's coffee lingered. On the couch, Mama Louise was curled up beneath her favorite rust-orange blanket. The one she claimed made her feel held by autumn. Even at this absurd hour, her posture was picture-perfect, serene, almost staged. "Morning," I whispered. She didn't look at me, didn't nod, didn't even shift, just stared at the wall like it had whispered something only she could hear. Mom had always been graceful in the way. Marble statues are graceful still, cold, and impossible to read unless you stand close enough to feel the cracks. "Mom, you okay?" A tiny smile touched her lips, sharp, practiced, almost rehearsed. "I'm just thinking." Thinking, that was her favorite word when she didn't want to explain anything. Before I could pry deeper, something caught our attention: footsteps. Rushing down the hallway. Cassidy, my younger sister, appeared like she'd sprinted through a storm. Hair wild, eyes red, hands shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone. She froze when she saw Mom, then me, then the clock. In the soft morning light, Cassidy looked wrong, not sad, not tired, more like someone who'd just watched her world collapse in real time. "Cass," I whispered. "What happened?" She swallowed hard, her lips parted, but no words came out, just a shaky breath and then a second one that sounded dangerously close to a sob. "Cassidy, what did you do?" Her voice wasn't accusing, and that was the terrifying part. It was disappointed, confident, as if she already knew. Cassidy shook her head violently. "I didn't. I swear I didn't mean for any of this." She didn't get to finish, because that's when Dad entered the room. Preston Wells III. A man who walked through the world like every room was his boardroom. Even with bed hair and mismatched pajamas, he managed to radiate the same stiff, intimidating authority he used on employees, reporters, and anyone foolish enough to disagree with him. He looked at Cassidy, then at Mom, then at the phone in his daughter's trembling hands. And the tension snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like paper tearing. Dad reached out, calm and deliberate, and took the phone from Cassidy's grip. She didn't resist, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. She just stared at the floor as if it could somehow absorb her guilt. Dad looked at the screen, his jaw clenched. A muscle twitched near his temple. "Where did you get this?" Cassidy broke, her whole body crumpled inward, like the truth had weight and she was finally feeling all of it. I didn't steal it. I found it. I swear. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't open anything, okay? I swear I didn't." Mom let out a slow, cold exhale like someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Eloise, Cassidy, tell the truth." Cassidy looked at me, her eyes wide, terrified, begging. And then the notifications started: ding ding ding. 3. Different screens in the room lit up all at once: Dad's phone, Mom's phone, and the tablet lying on the coffee table. Same sender, same subject line, same preview text. And in that moment, time didn't stop. It tightened, like a rope around our throats. Dad clicked the first message open, then another, then a third. Mom leaned closer. Her perfectly controlled breathing faltered for the first time. Cassidy started sobbing harder, her hands over her mouth, and I just stood there, watching everything I thought I knew about my family distort into something unrecognizable. What I saw on those screens wasn't a rumor, wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't something you could explain away with a quick apology and a promise to do better. It was proof. Undeniable, time-stamped photographic proof. Proof of secrets. Proof of lies. Proof of something deep, messy, and deliberate. Dad sank onto the couch like someone had pulled the bones right out of him. Mom pressed a trembling hand against her lips. Cassidy collapsed to her knees, and I felt something inside me shift. A tiny fracture. A warning crack. I had no idea yet how far this would go, how deep the lies ran, or how much of my own life was about to unravel. Because of what was on those screens. All I knew was this: our family's perfect facade just died in front of me, and the pieces were only beginning to fall. But here's the part I didn't see coming. The messages weren't the real betrayal. They were only the invitation to discover the truth every single one of them had been hiding, including the one secret meant for me. The truth didn't arrive in my family like a dramatic explosion. It didn't roar or shatter glass or rip through the house with chaos. Instead, it crept in slowly, the way water seeps into wood, quiet, patient, and destructive long before anyone notices. After the messages appeared on every screen in the living room, nobody said a word. My father stood frozen, staring at Cassidy's phone as if it had transformed into something venomous. My mother remained still under her blanket, her expression unreadable, and Cassidy, she stayed on her knees on the hardwood floor, her hands clamped over her face, shoulders trembling like she was being held together by fear alone. For a long moment, I waited for someone to explain, to reassure me that everything was some glitch or misunderstanding, but the silence told a different story, a truer one. My father's hand trembled as he held the phone out of instinct, something I had never seen before. He could navigate hostile boardrooms, unpredictable markets, and political pressure with unwavering control. Yet one message thread was enough to shake him. My mother straightened slowly, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. She didn't look surprised. If anything, her expression carried a painful familiarity, as if she had sensed this coming long before the rest of us. "Show me everything," she said, her voice low but sharp. My father didn't argue. That alone was unsettling. He simply turned the screen toward her, and I watched a flicker of tension cross her face. For my mother, someone who prided herself on composure, that brief tremor was a confession in itself. Cassidy finally lifted her head, mascara streaked her cheeks, and her breath hitched as she spoke. She swore she hadn't searched for anything, hadn't snooped or hacked or dug through anyone's private files. She insisted she'd simply opened her school locker that morning and found an envelope taped inside pictures, notes, and a USB drive. The mention of a physical envelope, hand-delivered and deliberately placed, sent a chill crawling through me. This wasn't a random cyber attack or a tech mishap. Someone had come close enough to touch her belongings. Someone who knew exactly how to strike. My father paced with restless energy, hands on his head. He muttered about blackmail, harassment, and the police. My mother cut through his panic with a single sentence, telling him he couldn't fix things by pretending they weren't happening. The implication in her voice was unmistakable. She believed this wasn't some outside attack, but fallout from something internal, something long ignored. My father stiffened, shooting her a warning look, but she sat taller, unbothered. Their tension crackled in the air, sharp enough to slice through the room. I stepped forward before the argument exploded. "What's in the messages?" I asked. Someone had to say it out loud. My father hesitated before answering, as if speaking the truth would solidify it. He said there were pictures, documents, and most terrifying of all, recordings. My stomach tightened. Recordings meant someone hadn't just collected information. They had listened, observed, waited. Someone had been inside our walls, listening to conversations we assumed were private. The weight of the revelation settled over all of us like a thick fog. My mother stood, pulling off her blanket, her shoulders tense. She demanded that my father show me everything, but he refused. His refusal didn't come from protection, it came from fear. Real fear, the kind that coated his voice and drained the color from his face. My mother ignored him, insisting I deserved the truth. That word "deserved" hit me harder than anything else. What about this disaster made me deserving? My father eventually handed me the phone. The screen felt heavier than its actual weight, as if I were holding something radioactive. The images were damning, not in the usual scandalous sense, but in the way they were collected. Private emails, financial statements, GPS logs, photos taken from strange angles, as though someone had been watching us from across the street or through tinted windows. Whoever created the file had pieced together fragments of our lives with precision. Then, I saw a file labeled "The Blind Spots, Part 1. The name alone made my blood run cold. Cassidy backed away the moment she saw I was about to open it. She confessed she hadn't dared to click on it herself. My mother stepped closer, firm and steady, telling me to play it. My father urgently tried to stop me. His voice cracked, something rare for him, but I tapped the file anyway. Static filled the speakers. Then came a voice, my father's. But not the composed, strategic voice he used in meetings or family discussions. This voice was raw, furious, and cornered. He was warning someone that she was watching, that they were already on thin ice, and that if whoever she was found out what had happened, there would be consequences. The audio cut suddenly, leaving behind a silence that seemed to echo through every corner of the room. My mother's posture went rigid. Cassidy let out a small cry. My father closed his eyes like the recording had physically struck him. He told me it was edited, twisted, taken out of context. My mother disagreed immediately, telling him he always assumed she was blind to the truth. He accused her of always believing the worst. She countered that he always gave her reasons too. Their voices rose, not in volume but in intensity, controlled, venomous, dangerously honest. Cassidy stepped between them, tears streaming, sobbing that someone was trying to tear us apart. But I could feel it clearly. The damage had already been done long before this morning. These messages weren't an attack, they were a reveal. Someone wasn't trying to tear us apart. They were showing us what we had already become. My mother then said something that froze all of us in place. She reminded my father that this file was only part one. My father's face drained of all color. He looked at her, then away, and didn't deny it. That single moment of silence from him, hesitant, guilty, confirmed everything. More was coming, and whatever was in part two wasn't meant for him or Cassidy, or my mother. It was meant for me. The messages were not the threat. They were only the warning. The real danger was buried in the secrets my family still refused to say out loud. Secrets someone else already knew, and they weren't finished with us yet. The rest of the morning unfolded in a strange, suspended haze. No one moved unless they had to, as if sudden motion might trigger another avalanche of truth. My father sat hunched at the edge of the couch, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles looked bruised. My mother stood near the fireplace, arms folded across her chest, her gaze fixed on the floor, like she was debating whether to scream or collapse. Cassidy curled up at the far end of the room, her knees pulled to her chest, staring blankly at the wall. And I, caught in the gravitational pull of all their secrets, felt like a stranger in my own home. For the first time in my life, the people who raised me looked unfamiliar, not because they were changing, but because the truth had stripped away the versions of them I thought I knew. Eventually, it was my mother who broke the silence. She asked my father who else had a copy of the recordings. Her voice was low and steady, yet beneath the surface was something jagged and dangerous. My father hesitated before answering, something he almost never did. He said he didn't know who had access to them, that the recordings were never meant to exist, that the conversations were private, taken without permission, twisted into something ugly. But my mother didn't react to his explanation. She just watched him with a calmness that didn't belong in a moment like this. Cassidy wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt, her breathing uneven. She kept whispering that this couldn't be happening, that maybe someone was framing us, that maybe Dad had enemies. But even she didn't sound convinced, because the truth wasn't in the recordings. The truth was in my family's reactions to them. The shock wasn't shock, it was recognition. I couldn't shake the feeling that these messages weren't meant for the whole family. They were meant to reach someone specific, someone who needed to see. Me, with shaky hands, I picked up the phone again. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open the rest of the files, but curiosity and dread mixed into a single, unstoppable force. I scrolled past the screenshots and documents until I reached a folder labeled personal. Hidden inside were only 3 photos, nothing else. The first one made my breath freeze. It was a picture of my mother taken from across the street. Zoomed in, grainy, but unmistakably her. She was standing outside a cafe I didn't recognize, looking over her shoulder with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not fear, not guilt, something else, something softer, something almost vulnerable. The second photo was worse. It showed my father in his office, sitting at his desk, his head buried in his hands. The timestamp in the corner told me it was taken late at night, long after he claimed he'd been home. But what unnerved me wasn't his posture or the timing. It was the angle of the shot, like the camera had been placed inside the room, hidden from view. Someone had been close enough to see him break. But the third photo, that one changed everything. I stared at the screen for several seconds, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a picture of me taken 6 months ago, walking out of a library near my college campus. My hair was tied in a messy bun, my backpack slung over one shoulder, my earbuds tangled in my jacket. It was such a normal moment, something so trivial and forgettable, yet someone had captured it with deliberate intent. The realization hit hard. These messages weren't about exposing my parents, they were about drawing me in. A cold sensation crept up my spine as I zoomed into the photo. In the corner, barely visible, was the reflection of a person holding the camera, a silhouette, not detailed enough to identify, but clearly there. Someone had been following me. My mother walked over when she noticed my expression shift. She asked what I saw. I turned the phone so she could view the pictures. Her reaction was subtle to subtle. She didn't gasp or freeze or grab the phone out of my hands. She simply exhaled slowly, as if she had expected this. My father hurried over next, his eyes darting over each image. When he reached the photo of me, something hard and painful flickered in his gaze. Fear. Real fear. Why is she in this? He muttered, more to himself than to us. Why involve her? That sentence sent a shiver across my skin. That wasn't a general question. That was a specific one. A question asked by someone who knew exactly how much worse things could get. My mother spoke before he could say more. She said the sender must be trying to pressure them, to force their hand, to push them into revealing something they'd been ignoring for too long. My father shook his head. He said this looked personal. Targeted, not just at him, or her, but at the family as a whole. But I knew better. It was targeted at me. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air tighter. My thoughts spiraled, reaching for answers that didn't exist yet. Who would want to follow me? Why? What did they want me to discover? Before I could ask out loud, Cassidy whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. She said she didn't think the person following me was trying to harm us. She thought they were trying to warn us. My father snapped at her, asking why she'd say something so irrational. But Cassidy didn't back down. She pointed out that if someone wanted to destroy us, they would have leaked everything publicly. They wouldn't have targeted just us. This was surgical, intentional, and strangely intimate. My mother looked at Cassidy in a way she rarely did, with something close to respect. She admitted that Cassidy wasn't wrong. The secrecy, the staging, the slow drip of revelations, it was all designed to keep us isolated from the outside world, to make us face each other, to force us to confront something we'd buried. But what? My father began pacing again, running a hand through his hair. He said he needed time to think. My mother responded sharply. That time was exactly what we didn't have. Cassidy's eyes darted between them like she was waiting for another explosion. I remained silent, my gaze locked on the photo of myself on the screen. The person behind the camera wasn't a stranger. I couldn't explain how I knew. It wasn't logical or rational. It was instinct. Something deep in my memory stirred, a faint echo of familiarity. The angle of the shot, the timing, the location. It wasn't random. Someone had followed me that day with purpose. Someone who knew where I lived, where I studied, where I went when I needed air. Someone who knew me well enough to get close without raising suspicion. The realization settled slowly but heavily. This wasn't a stranger sending these messages. This was someone connected to us, someone who had been hiding in the blind spots of our lives for far too long, and now, they were done hiding. The morning after everything unraveled, the house felt heavier than ever. Not tragic, just swollen with all the words no one had said yet. I woke up on the couch with my coat still on, a blanket half slipped off my shoulder, and the faint smell of the blueberry cobbler Eloise had burned hours earlier, lingering in the air. My mind replayed the night in fragments, the spilled secrets, the trembling hands, Cassidy's voice cracking, Preston's forced composure, my dad, stepping in like a referee in a fight he didn't sign up for. For a long moment, I just lay there, staring at the dim ceiling and trying to make sense of the emotional wildfire we had all accidentally started. When I finally sat up, my phone buzzed with the kind of timing that felt scripted. Cassidy, a single message. We need to talk. And no running this time. Normally, I would have postponed, overthought, rehearsed. But something in me had shifted. Maybe honesty hits harder after it destroys something first. Maybe I was just tired of living on the emotional porch, halfway inside my life and halfway out. So I grabbed my shoes, splashed cold water on my face, and drove. Cassidy was already waiting outside the studio when I arrived, arms folded but face soft. There were faint tear lines on her cheeks, the kind that dry before you can hide them. She didn't speak right away, and honestly, neither did I. We just stood there in the chilly morning silence until she finally exhaled and said, "I thought I lost you last night." Her voice broke something open in me. All the guilt, the fear, the frustration, It bubbled up in a way I couldn't stop this time. Cass, I said quietly, you almost did, because I didn't know how to stay when you kept leaving emotionally. She blinked, stunned, as if she didn't expect me to finally step out of my own shadows. But I continued, slower now, gentler. We've both been pretending everything's fine. I've been pretending I'm okay with it. And you've been pretending you didn't notice. Cassidy's expression folded into something vulnerable, not dramatic, not staged, just real. I noticed, she whispered. I just didn't know what to do with it. Then she looked away, rubbing her palms nervously. But last night, seeing you walk out, that scared me more than anything. Instead of answering with words, I followed my instinct and stepped forward, pulling her into a quiet, grounding hug. Not romantic, not desperate, just needed. We figure this out, I murmured. Together? But honestly this time. She nodded against my shoulder, whispering, honestly, yes. Inside, the studio still held the chaos of last night, the overturned chair, Eloise's scarf draped over the couch, Preston's half-empty coffee mug, my dad's jacket forgotten on the hook. Life paused mid-scene. We sat down in the main room, and for the first time in years, we talked like two people on the same page rather than actors performing different scripts. Cassidy went first. She admitted the pressure she'd been under, the anxieties she'd hidden, the fear of disappointing everyone including me. She confessed she felt trapped between who she was supposed to be and who she actually was. I didn't tell you, she said softly, because I thought you'd see it as weakness. I shook my head. Weakness isn't honesty. Hiding is my turn. I told her about the mental exhaustion I'd been carrying, how the constant buildup of unspoken things had made me withdraw without noticing. I told her how close I'd come to giving up, not on her, but on the whole situation. But leaving last night, I added, was the first wrong step I've taken in a long time. I panicked. Her hand found mine. We both panicked, she whispered. That was the weird thing after all the chaos. After all the emotional whiplash, after everything that nearly cracked us in half, the truth made the room feel lighter. And then came the twist. A soft knock echoed from the hallway. Dad stepped in, holding his jacket, clearly hoping to escape unnoticed. But when he saw us sitting side by side, he paused. You two okay? He asked, carefully measuring the space between us. Cassidy wiped her eyes. I nodded. He gave a small, proud smile, the kind dads give when they're trying not to interfere but still silently rooting for your healing. Good, he said simply, because there's something I didn't say last night. He sat down across from us, leaning his elbows on his knees. When families fall apart, it's never because of one moment. It's because of all the moments we avoid before that. You two showed up today. That's more than most people ever do. Cassidy leaned her head on my shoulder, tired but calmer. I felt her exhale deeply, like she was finally handing the weight over to gravity, instead of carrying it alone. We talked for another hour about boundaries, expectations, fears, growth. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was slow, intentional, almost warm, like finally opening a window in a room that's been closed too long. By afternoon, Eloise and Preston arrived too, each with their own apologies and awkward half-smiles. The family fractured last night, but today, it was stitching itself back together, imperfectly but honestly. Preston even made a joke about charging us for emotional overtime. And Eloise threatened to throw her burnt cobbler at him if he didn't stop. For the first time in days, the room actually laughed. The final moment came just as the sun dipped golden behind the windows, casting that warm cinematic glow we always joked looked to Hollywood to be real. Cassidy reached for my hand and squeezed it, not as a question, not as a plea, but as a promise. Thank you for not giving up on us, she whispered. I squeezed back. Thank you for letting me finally speak. We didn't solve every problem, not even close, but we finally stopped pretending. And sometimes that's the real beginning, not the perfect moment, not the polished ending, but the messy middle where people choose each other anyway. As we stepped outside, the cool evening breeze brushed over us, carrying the faint scent of pine and something softer hope. Maybe. Cassidy slipped her hand into mine again and said, let's go home. And for the first time in a very long time, it actually felt like we were heading there.